The Ohio State win over Penn State was, boy, a really good win. And it was very difficult for them for a big stretch of that game. I mean, let's face it, right? For 3.5 quarters, that was a struggle. So it begs the question, if I'm an Ohio State fan, what do I think about this? Let's start with Ohio State and Penn State.
First down to 10 to the 19. Intercepted. Wow! Tuimoloau again. Unbelievable. JT Tuimoloau has had the game of his life. He deflected a pass that led to an interception. He intercepted a pass. He got a sack. He got a strip sack. And now a pick six. What a game.
So it begs the question, do you feel better or do you feel worse about your team if you're an Ohio State fan? I think it's a bit of both. I really do. And I know that that's a cop-out, but there's reasons behind that. It is a bit of both. So let me start with the good, because there's a lot of really good stuff from this win at Penn State for Ohio State. First of all, as I suggested right before, it's a double-digit win on the road in a really tough environment. And I want to start with that environment. This stadium is as advertised. Like I said, and I know it's crazy when I told people during the course of this trip, like, hey, this is the first time I've actually been here to Penn State. They're like, no, that's not true. And it was true. And I had built it up, right? You see it on TV and you build up the environment, and I knew that it would be good, but it was even better than I expected. That's the best student section in all of college football. All due respect to some of the other student sections, they were fantastic. And they are loud. And I know it's kind of how the stadium is built, but there were moments in the game that I thought, boy, like it would be tough for an NFL offense to operate in this noise. It was that noisy. And so why do I feel good about Ohio State coming out? Because they faced that and come out and win. And that's not easy to do. Okay, so that's one. They were also taken into deep water in being down in that game in the fourth quarter. And they were asked to execute at a ridiculously high level, and then they did. Okay, so this was a great football game for like 3.5 quarters. There were plays being made on both sides. A lot was being asked of both sides. Joey Porter Jr. is having to cover Marvin Harrison Jr., and both quarterbacks are trying to avoid mistakes and make plays down the field. Defenses are making plays, making stops. There's third down conversions. There's fourth down conversion. There's swings in the lead. We had lead changes back and forth. It was a great game. The level of execution that the game was requiring from these two teams was really high. And so the fact that they were able to answer that bell and win the game and really pull away in the fourth quarter is a huge feather in the cap for Ohio State. That's a great win. I don't care what you want to say, right? Like, I don't care what conference you're in or anything. This was a great win for anybody out there. This is still a Penn State team that only has 2 losses, and they're to 2 of the, 4 best teams in the country, Michigan and Ohio State. So it's a team that rolled down into SEC country and just thumped Auburn by basically the exact same score that Georgia beat Auburn. That's a good Penn State team. And Ohio State pulled away late, even in the middle of what was an incredible environment, 108,000 strong. They won the game. They scored 44 points. They scored 40 again. They win by double digits again. So, like, you come away with that and you're like, man, even for the areas that they struggled, they were still able to be great. And I got to tell you, there was a stretch where the greatness reached a level that we haven't even seen yet from Ohio State, in particular this year. I want to take you into the fourth quarter, okay? If I was an Ohio State fan, I would feel like amazing about the stretch in the fourth quarter when their avalanche of points started. You heard me talk about this during the course of the broadcast, where they score these, and as Gus put it, punches and bunches, points and bunches. This is what Ohio State does, and they do it almost every single game. They did it to Iowa the week before. They scored 4 consecutive possessions. And all of a sudden in the fourth quarter against Penn State, that started to happen. I want you to This moment in time, I remember it vividly in the game. There's 9:26 left in the game. It's the fourth quarter, and Penn State had just taken a lead, 21-16. It was an epic drive. I believe it was 13 plays long. They had a couple of fourth down conversions. There was a weird sequence where they missed 2 field goals, but there were penalties, and then they go for it on fourth down. They throw a slant pass and get it. Then they finally get in there. They go for it on fourth. They end up getting the touchdown, which Eichenberg looks like he's got the tackle. I mean, it was a great drive. Terrific college football scene. And when Katron Allen dives into the end zone, there's 9:26 left. Penn State's up 21-16, and that place was loud. As loud of a stadium as I've ever been in my life. I took my headset off, and I was like, okay, like this is real. That place believed that they were going to beat Ohio State. You got to understand, James Franklin doesn't have a lot of these wins, and this place, they were feeling it. And the level of execution and play that we saw from Ohio State in that moment was exquisite. It was unbelievable. I'm like, did it happen that quick? Because in real time, I was like, wow, it seems like that happened fast, like a prize fight. And all of a sudden it's like uppercut, right cross, another uppercut. And it was like, holy cow, that team that had all that momentum is down on the canvas. There's 9:26 left in the game, 21-16 Penn State. And in the next minute and 9 seconds of game time, 6 snaps changed the entire game. And Ohio State was just like, boom, boom, boom. And it was like, I'm sorry, what? And after that minute and 9, it was 30-21 Ohio State. So the offense comes out there, and these are the 6 snaps I'm talking about. They score in 3 plays. They go right down the field. Stroud to Marvin Harrison Jr., beautiful in cut, bam. Then he just kind of drops it down, nondescript little curl route to Emeka Egbuka. Nice play. Then they get up to the line of scrimmage quickly, hand the ball off to Travion Henderson, and they finally get him sealed up in the run front, and he's gone. Gone. 3 plays. Boom, boom, boom. Touchdown. It's like, whoo, okay. Well, that was fast. Okay, well, now Penn State's going to have to answer. And they have all day long, right? Like, that's the style of game that we've been in. But this was easily the best drive that we've seen from either team. So then you go back out there, and first down for Penn State, yeah, not bad. Second down for Penn State, JT Tuimoloau shoves the tackle into Clifford's lap, knocks the ball out, and recovers the fumble. That's 5 snaps. Next play. Beautiful play call. They clear out a zone. Cade Stover over the middle. He breaks 3 tackles. Touchdown. Minute and 9 seconds, 30-21. Holy cow. That's how quickly it happens with Ohio State. Because of the talent that they have, yes, but it's also just the level of play that they can go to. See, all game long, they've been playing basically a B minus game for them. Penn State's been playing like an A minus game for them. And that's what it's taking for Penn State to keep up with Ohio State. And then all of a sudden, Ohio State went from playing a B game to playing an A minus or A game. And it was just like, boom. And that's what's so impressive, okay? And it happened the week before against Iowa, and now it happens on the road in a great environment against Penn State, where the 7th gear or 8th gear that Ohio State has, nobody else can really match that. I don't know. There's very few teams that I think around the country that can match that. Maybe Tennessee can match that. Maybe Georgia can match that. Maybe Alabama can match that. And then we'll see if Michigan can match that later in November when those two tangle. It was as impressive as I can possibly explain. In particular, and you have to understand now, you may have been at home watching it. I was in the building. I heard what the building sounded like at the 9:26 mark after the touchdown. So to execute that way and to take your game to that level, I got to tell you, was unbelievable. The other thing that I feel great about if I'm an Ohio State fan is the fact that these 2 young stars just went to a totally different level than what we've seen. And I'm speaking of Marvin Harrison Jr. and JT Tuimoloau. Those 2 players all of a sudden became great players right before our eyes. The week before against Iowa, I had told the world really that, hey, I think Marvin Harrison's going to be the best wide receiver in the NFL like 2026, 2027. Still feel that way. Saturday during the game, it finally hits me, and I watch a lot of tape and just other teams, and he's the best receiver in college football. And that's not a knock to anybody else. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best receiver in college football. This guy is an unbelievable route runner. He's very clean, creates separation. He catches the ball really well, as sure-handed as anybody out there. And the best part about him is that even though he can create separation and does often, he catches the ball in contested areas as well as anybody out there. And when they needed a play for the majority of the game, they had to go to number 18, and he delivered. He was phenomenal in that game. Whether it was third downs, the slant pass I'm thinking about, the play to start that 6-play avalanche, if you will, that in cut. And he's working against Joey Porter Jr., who I think is probably going to be a first-round corner, right? Like, these are tough catches and tough throws that C.J. Stroud was making. These were not easy throws, okay? This was not throwing on air. This was not the 130th ranked pass defense out there, okay? Like, Penn State's really good in the secondary. They challenge you. They create small windows. And that's why I was so impressed with the way Harrison was delivering and the way Stroud was delivering. Then you go to the defensive side, and all of a sudden there's this JT Tuimoloau. And I knew he was really good. I've watched him practice several times. I watched him play last year and practice in the spring. Now I've seen him practice this fall, now seen him play this fall. And I knew he was talented and I knew he was developing. But JT Tuimoloau is taking himself to a place where he is going to be in the running for Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, right? Like, let's put it to you this way. I've never seen a football game where a defensive end dominated to that degree. I've seen him dominate before. I saw Chase Young dominate Wisconsin in my career. The 2019 game. I've seen the Bosa brothers dominate. I've seen a lot of great performances. I remember calling early in my career Ndamukong Suh, who was an unbelievable defensive lineman. None of them did what Tuimoloau did on Saturday. None of them. This performance was as good of a performance as I've ever seen. And I think that this guy is now going to be in the running for not just Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, but, maybe some national awards after what he did. This was one of those stages and games that I will never forget forever and ever. First of all, he tips the ball in the first series that creates the interception. He drops into coverage and defensive back style dives for an interception himself. He causes the sack fumble, recovers it himself, jumps up, gets a pick on a little tunnel screen, takes it back, pick 6 himself. He had other tackles for loss. He was a game wrecker, and I was thoroughly impressed with JT Tuimoloau. These two guys are stars. I believe that they are the two best players on the team, along with C.J. Stroud, and I don't know if it's all that close. And the fact that they went there and they needed to play that well and did and delivered was pretty superhuman. And I would be really happy if I was an Ohio State fan. Okay, where do I feel worse now? Why is it both, Joel? Well, let me tell you why I also feel worse. Because the offensive line did not play well enough. So both can be true. I can be thoroughly impressed with the way that Ohio State elevated their game when they needed to. But the fact remains is that they were playing that B- game to begin with, right? For the 3.5 quarters that put them in that deficit with 9:26 left. Why were they in that deficit? Why was it so difficult? Because the offensive line didn't play very well. And this offensive line now has a pattern of not playing well. So I've seen 8 straight quarters of Ohio State football. I've called 8 straight quarters of Ohio State football. For 7 of those quarters, it was anemic trying to run the football. And I know Iowa's a good defense, so I want to give Iowa some credit. And their defensive line does a good job. And by the way, Penn State played really well defensively for the majority of that game until the end, giving up some of those scores. But for 7 quarters, Ohio State's offensive line has not played anywhere close to as well as they're going to need to play to win the national championship. They averaged 2.1 yards per carry over those 7 quarters, the 4 with Iowa and then the first 3 with Penn State. 2.1. That's 49 attempts. That's not a small sample size. Okay, so that is a struggle, and the struggle is real. And the problem is that you can't just say, well, they were really great defenses. You can get away with that with Iowa, but you can't with Penn State. I know Penn State played better, but the problem is, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago? We saw your rival, Michigan, put up 418 yards on that defense on the ground. So you can't and you don't have the excuse of like, well, Penn State's great up front. No, I'm sorry. Not when we saw Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards do what they did to this Penn State team. So for 7 quarters, Ohio State, 2.1 yards per carry on 49 attempts. That's not going to cut it. And in fact, if they continue to play that way and they don't get better, I'm willing to lay a pretty hefty statement. They will not win a national championship if their offensive line plays like they did in those 7 quarters. They can't. They can't. Well, why can't they? Because, Joel, I just saw them put up 54 with their O-line playing that way and then 44 against Penn State. Here's the problem. In order to win a national championship, you're going to have to do it against Georgia, potentially, Michigan down the road, maybe Tennessee, maybe Alabama. And those teams will not let you off the hook like Iowa and Penn State did. Okay, see, those 2 teams, Iowa does not have a second gear offensively. So that was always going to be an Ohio State win. Penn State didn't have 5th gear to try to match Ohio State. So Ohio State always had kind of the ace up their sleeve, like, we can go a step higher. Well, what happens when they play a team that also can go a step higher? They better play a complementary style of football on the offensive side. You see, 2 things happen when you're not able to run the football, and these are detrimental to the way that they play. One is you don't have the benefit of play action pass. And this is where Ohio State really hurts people, is in the play action pass. This is where they create their explosive plays. Okay, this is where they put defenders in conflict, create explosive plays, and score in bunches. This is how they do it. How do they score quickly on 4 and 5 and 6 plays? Play action pass. How do you play action pass? You run the ball successfully, in particular on first down. The other thing not being able to run does is it puts you in obvious passing situations. And the statistics, by the way, just based on last Saturday alone, are stark in this regard. They faced 12 third downs at Penn State, 12 of them. 6 of those, so half of the third downs that they faced, were of 10 plus yards. The average yards to go on third down Saturday against Penn State was 8.7. That is a direct reflection of the lack of running game and the lack of quality offensive line play. That puts way too much stress on your passing game. It puts way too much stress on C.J. Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr., Ryan Day, the offensive play caller. You can't play like that. It's so rare to get put into a situation where you have to execute in that environment, and you do. Now, that's partly why I feel so good about the way that they played, because they were put in that environment and they did play really well. But you can't expect to do that time over time, game over game. And in particular, when you're facing an opponent that could potentially build a 2, 3, 4 possession lead on you if you're playing really poorly in your offensive line in the first 3 quarters. So, do I feel better or do I feel worse about Ohio State? Both. I feel unbelievable about the fact that it was a great win in a tough environment. I feel great about the fact that we developed really solid and quality young stars. But I also feel really, really bad about that offensive line, because that's got to get corrected. Ohio State will not win a national championship if they play that way on the offensive line. So they've got 3 games to get better. You look at that schedule, and the freight train is headed to that matchup against Michigan. They've got 3 games to get better. That's the entire goal of the next month for Ohio State, is to fix the offensive line. If they don't, I don't know how far they can go. Obviously, they're ridiculously talented and can play offense with anybody in the country. In particular, throwing the ball, or more specifically. Their defense is really good and developing a star at defensive end, but I can't tell you that they're going to win a national title with that type of O-line play.